Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, translated by Constance Garnett. The paper fell out of Raskolnikov's hands, and he looked wildly at the smart lady who was so unceremoniously treated. But he soon saw what it meant, and at once began to find positive amusement in the scandal. He listened with pleasure, so that he longed to laugh and laugh. All his nerves were on edge. Ilya Petrovich, the head clerk, was beginning anxiously, but stopped short, for he knew from experience that the enraged assistant could not be stopped except by force. As for the smart lady, at first she positively trembled before the storm, but strange to say, the more numerous and violent the terms of abuse became, the more amiable she looked, and the more seductive the smiles she lavished on the terrible assistant. She moved uneasily and curtsied incessantly, waiting impatiently for a chance of putting in her word, and at last she found it. There was no sort of noise or fighting in my house, Mr. Captain. She pattered all at once, like peas dropping, speaking Russian confidently, though with a strong German accent. And no sort of scandal, and his honor came drunk. And it's the whole truth I'm telling. Mr. Captain, and I am not to blame. Mine is an honorable house, Mr. Captain, and honorable behavior. Mr. Captain, and I always dislike any scandal myself. But he came quite tipsy and asked for 3 bottles again, and then he lifted up one leg and began playing the pianoforte with one foot. And that is not at all right in an honorable house. And he broke the piano, and it was very bad manners indeed, and I said so. And he took up a bottle and began hitting everyone with it. And then I called the porter, and Karl came, and he took Karl and hit him in the eye. And he hit Keta in the eye too, and gave me 5 slaps on the cheek. And it was so ungentlemanly in an honorable house, Mr. Captain. I screamed. And he opened the window over the canal and stood in the window, squealing like a little pig. It was a disgrace. The idea of squealing like a little pig at the window into the street. I upon him, and Karl pulled him away from the window by his coat. And it is true, Mr. Captain, he tore Pine Rock. And then he shouted that man must pay him 15 rubles damages. And I did pay him, Mr. Captain, 5 rubles for Zine Rock. And he is an ungentlemanly visitor and caused all the scandal. I will show you up, he said, for I can write to all the papers about you. Then he was an author. Yes, Mr. Captain, and what an ungentlemanly visitor in an honorable house. Now then, enough. I have told you already. Ilya Petrovich, the head clerk, repeatedly, significantly said. The assistant glanced rapidly at him. The head clerk slightly shook his head. So I tell you this, most respectable Louise Ivanova. I tell it to you for the last time, the assistant went on. If there is a scandal in your honorable house once again, I will put you yourself in the lockup, as it is called in polite society. Do you hear? So, a literary man, an author, took 5 rubles for his coat tail in an honorable house. A nice set, these authors. And he cast a contemptuous glance at Raskolnikov. There was a scandal the other day in the restaurant too. An author had eaten his dinner and would not pay. I'll write a satire on you, says he. And there was another of them on a streamer last week. Used the most disgraceful language to the respectable family of a civil councillor, his wife and daughter. And there was one of them turned out of a confectioner's shop the other day. They are like that, authors, literary men, students, town criers. You get along. I shall look in upon you myself one day. Then you better be careful. Do you hear? With hurried deference, Louise Ivanova fell to curtsying in all directions and so curtsied herself to the door. But at the door, she stumbled backwards against a good-looking officer with a fresh, open face and splendid, thick, fair whiskers. This was the superintendent of the district himself, Nikodem Fomitch. Louise Ivanova made haste to curtsy almost to the ground, and with mincing little steps, she fluttered out of the office. Again, thunder and lightning, a hurricane, said Nikodem Fomitch to Ilya Petrovitch in a civil and friendly tone. You are aroused again. You are fuming again. I heard it on the stairs. Well, what then? Ilya Petrovitch drawled with gentlemanly nonchalance, and he walked with some papers to another table with a jaunty swing of his shoulders at each step. Here, if you will kindly look, an author or a student has been won at last, does not pay his debts, has given an IOU, won't clear out his room, and complaints are constantly being lodged against him. And here he has been pleased to make a protest against my smoking in his presence. He behaves like a cad himself, and just look at him, please. Here, the gentleman, and the very attractive he is. Poverty is not a vice, my friend, but we know you go off like powder. You can't bear a slight. I dare say you took offense at something and went too far yourself, continued Nikodem Fomitch, turning affably to Raskolnikov. But you were wrong there. He is a capital fellow, I assure you, but explosive, explosive. He gets hot, fires up, boils over, and no stopping him. And then it's all over. And at the bottom, he's a heart of gold. His nickname in the regiment was the Explosive Lieutenant. And what a regiment it was too, cried Ilya Petrovitch, much gratified at this agreeable banter, though still sulky. Raskolnikov had a sudden desire to say something exceptionally pleasant to them all. Excuse me, Captain, he began easily, suddenly addressing Nikodem Fomitch. Will you enter into my position? I am ready to ask pardon if I have been ill-mannered. I am a poor student, sick and shattered. Shattered was the word he used, by poverty. I am not studying because I cannot keep myself now, but I shall get money. I have a mother and a sister in the province of X. They will send it to me and I will pay. My landlady is a good-hearted woman, but she is so exasperated at my having lost my lessons and not paying her for the last 4 months that she does not even send up my dinner. And I don't understand this IOU at all. She is asking me to pay her on this IOU. How am I to pay her? Judge for yourselves. But that is not our business, you know, the head clerk was observing. Yes, I perfectly agree with you, but allow me to explain. Raskolnikov put it again, still addressing Nikodem Fomitch, but trying his best to address Ilya Petrovitch also, though the latter persistently appeared to be rummaging among his papers and to be contemptuously oblivious of him. Allow me to explain that I have been living with her for nearly 3 years, and at first, for why not confess it? At the very beginning, I promised to marry her daughter. It was a verbal promise, freely given. She was a girl, indeed I liked her, though I was not in love with her. A youthful affair, in fact, that is. I mean to say that my landlady gave me credit freely in those days, and I led a life I was very heedless. Nobody asks you for these personal details, sir. We have no time to waste. Ilya Petrovitch interposed roughly and with a note of triumph. But Raskolnikov stopped him hotly, though he suddenly found it exceedingly difficult to speak. But excuse me, it is for me to explain how it all happened. In my turn, though I agree with you, it is unnecessary. But a year ago, the girl died of typhus. I remained lodging there as before. And when my landlady moved into her present quarters, she said to me, and in a friendly way, that she had complete trust in me. But still, would I not give her an IOU for 115 rubles, all the debt I owed her? She said if only I gave her that, she would trust me again, as much as I liked, and that she would never, those were her own words, make use of that IOU till I could pay for myself. And now, when I have lost my lessons and have nothing to eat, she takes action against me. What am I to say to that? All these affecting details are no business of ours. Ilya Petrovich interrupted rudely. You must give a written undertaking. But as for your love affairs and all these tragic events, we have nothing to do with that. Come now, you are harsh, muttered Nikodem Fomitch, sitting down at the table and also beginning to write. He looked a little ashamed. Write, said the head clerk to Raskolnikov. Write what? The latter asked gruffly. I will dictate to you. Raskolnikov fancied that the head clerk treated him more casually and contemptuously after his speech, but strange to say, he suddenly felt completely indifferent to anyone's opinion, and this revulsion took place in a flash, in one instant. If he had cared to think a little, he would have been amazed indeed that he could have talked to them like that a minute before, forcing his feelings upon them. And where had those feelings come from? Now, if the whole room had been filled, not with the police officers, but with those nearest and dearest to him, he would not have found one human word for them. So empty was his heart. A gloomy sensation of agonizing, everlasting solitude and remoteness took conscious form in his soul. It is not the meanness of his sentimental effusions before Ilya Petrovich, nor the meanness of the latter's triumph over him, that had caused this sudden revulsion in his heart. Oh, what had he to do now with his own baseness, with all these petty vanities, officers, German women, debts, police offices? If he had been sentenced to be burnt at that moment, he would not have stirred, would hardly have heard the sentence to the end. Something was happening to him entirely new, sudden and unknown. It was not that he understood, but he felt clearly with all the intensity of sensation that he could never more appeal to these people in the police office with sentimental effusions like his recent outburst, or with anything whatever, and that if they had been his own brothers and sisters and not police officers, it would have been utterly out of question to appeal to them in any circumstance of life. He had never experienced such a strange and awful sensation, and what was most agonizing, it was more a sensation than a conception or idea. A direct sensation, the most agonizing of all the sensations he had known in his life. The head clerk began dictating to him the usual form of declaration that he could not pay, that he undertook to do so at a future date, that he would not leave the town nor sell his property, and so on. But you can't write. You can hardly hold the pen, observed the head clerk, looking with curiosity at Raskolnikov. Are you ill? Yes, I'm giddy. Go on. That's all. Sign it. The head clerk took the paper and turned to attend to others. Raskolnikov gave back the pen, but instead of getting up and going away, he put his elbows on the table and pressed his head in his hands. He felt as if a nail was being driven into his skull. A strange idea suddenly occurred to him to get up at once, to go up to Nicodem Fomitch and tell him everything that had happened yesterday, and then to go with him to his lodgings and to show him the things in the hole in the corner. The impulse was so strong that he got up from his seat to carry it out. Hadn't I better think a minute? Flashed through his mind. No, better cast off the burden without thinking. But all at once he stood still, rooted to the spot. Nicodem Fomitch was talking eagerly with Ilya Petrovich, and the words reached him. It's impossible. They'll both be released. To begin with, the whole story contradicts itself. Why should they have called the porter if it had been their doing? To inform against themselves, or as a blind. No, that would be too cunning. Besides, Stryakov, the student, was seen at the gate by both the porters and a woman as he went in. He was walking with 3 friends who left him only at the gate, and he asked the porters to direct him in the presence of the friends. Now, would he have asked his way if he had been going with such an object? As for Koch, he spent half an hour at the silversmith's below, before he went up to the old woman, and he left him at exactly 7:45. Now, just consider. But excuse me, how do you explain this contradiction? They state themselves that they knocked and the door was locked. Yet 3 minutes later, when they went up with the porter, it turned out that the door was unfastened. That's just it. The murderer must have been there and bolted himself in, and they'd have caught him for a certainty if Koch had not been an ass and gone to look for the porter too. He must have seized the interval to get downstairs and slip by them somehow. Koch keeps crossing himself and saying, if I had been there, he would have jumped out and killed me with his axe. He is going to have a Thanksgiving service. Ha ha. And no one saw the murderer. They might well not see him. The house is a regular Noah's Ark, said the head clerk who was listening. It's clear, quite clear, Nicodem Fomitch repeated warmly. No, it is anything but clear, Ilya Petrovich maintained. Raskolnikov picked up his hat and walked towards the door, but he did not reach it. When he recovered consciousness, he found himself sitting in a chair supported by someone on the right, while someone else was standing on the left, holding a yellowish glass filled with yellow water, and Nicodem Fomitch standing before him, looking intently at him. He got up from the chair. What's this? Are you ill? Nicodem Fomitch asked rather sharply. He could hardly hold his pen when he was signing, said the head clerk, settling back in his place and taking up his work again. Have you been ill long? Cried Ilya Petrovich from his place, where he too was looking through papers. He had, of course, come to look at the sick man when he fainted, but retired at once when he recovered. Since yesterday, muttered Raskolnikov in reply. Did you go out yesterday? Yes. Though you were ill? Yes. At what time? About 7. And where did you go, may I ask? Along the street. Short and clear. Raskolnikov, white as a handkerchief, had answered sharply, jerkily, without dropping his black, feverish eyes before Ilya Petrovich's stare. He can scarcely stand upright. And you? Nicodem Fomitch was beginning. No matter, Ilya Petrovich pronounced rather peculiarly. Nicodem Fomitch would have made some further protest, but glancing at the head clerk, who was looking very hard at him, he did not speak. There was a sudden silence. It was strange. Very well then, concluded Ilya Petrovich. We will not detain you. Raskolnikov went out. He caught the sound of eager conversation on his departure, and above the rest rose the questioning voice of Nicodem Fomitch. In the street, his faintness passed off completely. A search. There will be a search at once, he repeated to himself, hurrying home. The brutes, they suspect. His former terror mastered him completely again. Chapter 2. And what if there has been a search already? What if I find them in my room? But here was his room, nothing and no one in it. No one had peeped in. Even Nastasia had not touched it. But heavens, how could he have left all these things in the hole? He rushed to the corner, slipped his hand under the paper, pulled the things out and lined his pockets with them. There were 8 articles in all, 2 little boxes with earrings or something of the sort. He hardly looked to see. Then 4 small leather cases. There was a chain too, merely wrapped in newspaper and something else in the newspaper that looked like a decoration. He put them all in different pockets of his overcoat and the remaining pocket of his trousers, trying to conceal them as much as possible. He took the purse too. Then he went out of his room, leaving the door open. He walked quickly and resolutely, and though he felt shattered, he had his senses about him. He was afraid of pursuit. He was afraid that in another half hour, another quarter of an hour, perhaps, instructions would be issued for his pursuit. And so, at all costs, he must hide all traces before then. He must clear everything up while he still had some strength, some reasoning power left him. Where was he to go? That had been long settled. Fling them into the canal and all traces hidden in the water. The thing would be at an end. So he had decided in the night of his delirium, when several times he had had the impulse to get up and go away, to make haste and get rid of all of it. But to get rid of it turned out to be a very difficult task. He wandered along the bank of the Katerinsky Canal for half an hour or more and looked several times at the steps running down into the water, but he could not think of carrying out his plan. Either raft stood at the step's edge, and women were washing clothes on them, or boats were moored there, and people were swarming everywhere. Moreover, he could be seen and noticed from the banks on all sides. It would look suspicious for a man to go down on purpose, stop, and throw something into the water. And what if the boxes were to float instead of sinking? And of course they would. Even as it was, everyone he met seemed to stare and look around, as if they had nothing to do but to watch him. Why is it, or can it be, my fancy? He thought. At last, the thought struck him that it might be better to go to the Neva. There were not so many people there. He would be less observed and it would be more convenient in every way. Above all, it was further off. He wondered how he could have been wandering for a good half hour, worried and anxious in this dangerous past, without thinking of it before. And that half hour he had lost over an irrational plan, simply because he had thought of it in delirium. He had become extremely absent and forgetful, and he was aware of it. He certainly must make haste. He walked towards the Neva. But on the way, another idea struck him. Why to the Neva? Would it not be better to go somewhere far off, to the islands again, and there hide the things in some solitary place, in a wood or under a bush, and mark the spot perhaps? And though he felt incapable of clear judgment, the idea seemed to him a sound one. But he was not destined to go there. He saw on the left a passage leading between 2 blank walls to the courtyard. On the right hand, the blank, unwhitewashed wall of a 4-storied house stretched far into the court. On the left, a wooden hoarding ran parallel with it for 20 paces into the court and then turned sharply to the left. Here was a deserted, fenced-off place where rubbish of different sorts was lying. At the end of the court, the corner of a low, smutty stone shed, apparently part of some workshop, peeped from behind the hoarding. It was probably a carriage builder's or carpenter's shed. The whole place from the entrance was black with coal dust. Here would be the place to throw it, he thought. Not seeing anyone in the yard, he slipped in and at once saw near the gate a sink, such as is often put in the yards where there are many workmen or cab drivers. And on the hoarding above had been scribbled in chalk the time-honored witticism, "Standing here strictly forbidden." This was all the better, for there would be nothing suspicious about his going in. Here I could throw it all in a heap and get away. Looking around once more, with his hand already in his pocket, he noticed against the outer wall, between the entrance and the sink, a big hewn stone, weighing perhaps 60 pounds. The other side of the wall was a street. He could hear passers-bys, always numerous in that part, but he could not be seen from the entrance, unless someone came in from the street, which might well happen indeed, so there was need of haste. He bent down over the stone, seized the top of it firmly in both hands, and using all his strength, turned it over. Under the stone was a small hollow in the ground, and he immediately emptied his pockets into it. The purse lay at the top, and yet the hollow was not filled up. Then he seized the stone again, and with one twist turned it back, so that it was in the same position again, though it stood a very little higher. But he scraped the earth about it and pressed it at the edges with his foot. Nothing could be noticed. Then he went out and turned into the square. Again, an intense, almost unbearable joy overwhelmed him for an instant, as it had in the police office. I have buried my tracks, and who can think of looking under that stone? It has been lying there most likely ever since the house was built, and will lie as many years more. And if it were found, who would think of me? It is all over, no clue. And he laughed. Yes, he remembered that he began laughing, a thin, nervous, noiseless laugh, and went on laughing all the time he was crossing the square. But when he reached the boulevard, where 2 days before he had come upon that girl, his laughter suddenly ceased. Other ideas crept into his mind. He felt all at once that it would be loathsome to pass that seat on which, after the girl was gone, he had sat and pondered, and that it would be hateful too to meet that whiskered policeman to whom he had given the 20 kopecks. Damn him! He walked, looking about him angrily and distractedly. All his ideas now seemed to be circling round some single point, and he felt that there really was such a point, and that now he was left facing that point, and for the first time, indeed, during the last 2 months. Damn it all, he thought suddenly in a fit of ungovernable fury. If it has begun, then it has begun. Hang the new life. Good Lord, how stupid it is. And what lies I told today. How despicably I fawned upon that wretched Ilya Petrovitch. But that is all folly. What do I care for them all and my fawning upon them? It is not that at all. Suddenly he stopped. A new, utterly unexpected and exceedingly simple question perplexed and bitterly confounded him. If it all has really been done deliberately and not idiotically, if I really had a certain and definite object, how is it that I did not even glance into the purse and don't know what I had there, for which I have undergone these agonies, and have deliberately undertaken this base, filthy, degrading business? And here I wanted at once to throw into the water the purse together with all the things which I had not seen either. How's that? Yes, that was so. That was all so. Yet he had known it all before, and it was not a new question for him, even when it was decided in the night without hesitation and consideration, as though so it must be, as though it could not possibly be otherwise. Yet, yes, he had known it all and understood it all. It surely had all been settled even yesterday at the moment when he was bending over the box and pulling the jewel cases out of it. Yes, so it was. It is because I am very ill, he decided grimly at last. I have been worrying and fretting myself, and I don't know what I am doing. Yesterday and the day before yesterday, and all this time I have been worrying myself. I shall get well and I shall not worry. But what if I don't get well at all? Good God, how sick I am of it all.